share her story. Nimi, how are you? So happy to have you.
Hey, what's going on? Excited to be here. Thanks for having me, girl.
Wonderful. Why don't you just go ahead and start by telling our audience who you are, what you do, all the amazing things that you come with?
Oh, that's always a mouthful for me to answer because I feel like I do so much and I've been trying to tailor it down. But in a nutshell, who is Nimi Bello? Most of you guys know me, aka as Agile Bay. So Nimi Bello is not only a mom, wife, business owner, friend to many. Um, I look at myself as a multifaceted individual. I spent my last 7, 8 years in the tech space, and I feel like it's really shaped who I am or who I've always wanted to be. And I think now, fast forward to 2023, and where I am, and currently, I'm all about building, adapting, and enhancing. Hence the name Agile Bay. So those three things really means a whole lot to me because I feel like we're constantly building, we're constantly adapting, and we're constantly enhancing. It never stops. And that's one of the things that I strongly believe, and I'm really passionate about transcending to other creatives, businesses, and other women too, across the board in general. So I would say in a nutshell, Nimi Bello is somebody that builds, adapts, enhance not only her capabilities but individuals as well.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. I love the whole tech analogy, the agile piece, the building, the enhancing, and adapting, or the building, adapting, and enhancing piece.
Yes.
Um, how have you taken that, going from tech, um, and like also accepting the fact that you're creative and like jumping into this like space of entrepreneurship? How did that happen? When did it happen? What were the challenges that you faced? Interested to know, like, how did you do it?
I think there was something that happened during the pandemic for me. I think a lot of people were just like an awakening and awareness, and I feel like more in alignment with the voice of God, hearing from God. So for me, I feel like going back to like my childhood, I've always been a connector. I've always been a bridge, and I think I was made for connectivity and just intentional um, creation. I feel like when I think about just myself and just everything that I've done, I've had a lot of failures. I have a lot of things that I've tried and I have not succeeded at. But I feel like what I'm really good at is just helping people to find their inner voice too, is to build and to pull something out of them. So I feel like even with my role as a scrum master, that's something that I was getting paid to do with teams. So I feel like it wasn't until the pandemic that I really started to see my capabilities and the value that I have for not only myself but to other people as well. So I would say that it started in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, where I was kind of pulled by God to kind of do something that brings people together. And when I did Lincoln Power, just the platform of just building the community, I feel like God also was like, this is not it. You know, you got to pivot. And then Agile Bay came around 2021, personal brand, where I was using my platform just to educate people of color to get into tech, and not only specifically tech, but more around this career path of becoming a scrum master and getting into agile, because a lot of people of color were not aware of the how to getting into this field. And we're talking about a field that is white male dominated. I started this industry about 7, 8 years ago, and there was not a lot of information out there, or even people that even look like me. So fast forward to today, you have spaces like Clubhouse that has been a huge component of getting the word out there about getting a career, like being a scrum master and everything. So I would say for me, it was 2020 and just having that moment and that quietness and that stillness with God and just saying yes to what God was calling me to do. And then fast forward, now we're here.
I love that you said yes to what God was calling you to do. I always say, when I say every woman has an inner warrior, I mean that, but it's up to her to let her out, right? Let
Yeah.
your inner warrior out, which means that you have choice. You have choice to dim that warrior, or you can say yes to the call, right? And I want to know, one, what did it feel like? You said you had an awakening.
Yeah.
How did you know? What did it feel like? What was happening? And then secondly, what caused you to say yes? What made you say yes? Because you had a choice to say no, but you said yes.
I feel like there was no choice at that point. You know, it was like, what's the excuse? You know, we're in a lockdown, you're at home, you have all this time. And I think at that time it's like there's no excuses. There's no worldly distractions, right? There's no I gotta take the kids to school, there's no I gotta go for this event, there's no I gotta show up here. Now you are in a situation that you are confined in your home. Just think about it. You're confined in your home and you can't go anywhere, you're on lockdown. So it's kind of like you get into a situation where you're like, okay, either I'm gonna do it, or I'm not gonna do it, right? And I feel like there was this constant pull that God was like, you don't got an excuse now, because there was always an excuse. I know for me, I'm a big procrastinator. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, oh yeah, I just no, I'm a procrastinator. I'm still working on. I'm a work in progress, and I feel like at that. And I feel like at that point, it was like God was like, sis, you don't have no more excuses. Like there is none. So do this thing, put it out there. And I think also with social media, there's this huge fear of I don't want to fail. I want it to already be packaged and ready to go. And I think going through that process is also a humbling experience to not only find yourself, but to also accept, is this thing for me or is it not for me? Right. So I think for me, God put me in a situation where I had no choice but to say yes and to actually do the things that He's been pouring in my heart. Because it's always been there. It's always been there. But I feel like the worldly distractions kind of kept me away from doing this a lot quicker, as opposed to starting off late. And I'm not saying you can't pick up your dream or your aspirations at any given time, but I do feel like we do have a lot of distractions, and we allow those things to kind of deter us from the things that God is calling us to do.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I have a whole conversation, a whole message around distraction and focus. Um, but we won't get into that today. Tell me more about the awakening period and what did it feel like? Like for someone who may be thinking about doing something or trying to discover who they are or what's next for them, what are some steps or some tips that you can support them in? Like, how do you discover this awakening?
Start being intentional, like whatever spiritual journey that you need to go on, not only within yourself, but just start being intentional with your time, the things that you're spending your time on. Start doing an audit of what am I spending my time on. You know, what are the things that I know I desire and I want to do, and I know that if I if I gave myself a little bit of time, a little bit of intentionality, I could actually do these things. I know for me, I've always known that I'm a multifaceted person, but I never saw that I could actually turn it into a business, right? Because I'm very scattered brain. So for me, it's like, oh my God, I don't have structure, I don't have this, I don't have that. And then I think for me, being a scrum master helped me to kind of get my scatteredness into a more organized fashion, if that makes sense. So for me, it's like, okay, yes, I know I'm scattered. Identifying your weakness too will also help you to like know, like, and then give yourself grace, giving yourself grace to just know like every day is an opportunity for you to start something and to execute. You can plan around things all day, but you also have to give yourself chance to like dream and get out of your head and just do things. I think a lot of us, we get into a space where we want the already made package. We want it to already be perfect. We don't want to go through the journey and the healing and facing our trauma. And I think for me, I've had to go through a series of several things, like you asked, spiritual alignment with God, therapy, um, calling myself out on my bullshit and saying, you know what, you're not doing this because you're doing this.
Mm,
So I think for me, it's having those like that awakening. It's literally it's like a light bulb. Something just it's a switch, just kind of goes off when you start being intentional with your spiritual time with God and just really leaning in and saying, God, like what is it that you want from me, and what is it that you've called me to do? And I
yeah.
feel like if you start asking those questions to God, He'll definitely give you the blueprint. He'll give you the answers, and it may not I mean, and I don't want to sit here and be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna just be talking to God, and God is gonna just be like, hey, go do X, Y, Z. And the funny thing about God, God doesn't give us everything in order. Sometimes He doesn't. He kind of just says, drops little nuggets of things, and He kind of watches you to see if you're gonna be obedient. I think that's the word I was looking for. It's obedient. So for me, going back to just my journey of Lincoln Power, it was a tap on the shoulder. tap on the shoulder, and God said, you know, I had this. For me, I get a lot of energy from connecting with people, and with COVID, I couldn't do that. So I had to think outside of the box. Like, okay, you know, how can I commune with people? How can I fellowship with people? I'm missing that part. And then there's things like Zoom. You know, there's things like Zoom. So I brought a group of women together, and literally that's kind of what propelled where I am today. Like that moment of the intentional fasting, the praying, the aspect, or whatever is literally what led me to where I am today. I did not know that Agile Bay was going to be a thing when I said yes to that. You
Yeah.
know, so just think about it, like where I am today with expanding my personal brand into now more of a global positioning, and then I'm even in the fashion space, right? So just think about what my life was like 2, 3 years ago when I'm having that conversation with God, and God was like, you know what? Go ahead and do this thing. If I would have said no, I probably wouldn't be here having this conversation with you right now.
Mhm. It's really interesting that I'm finding, and the more I'm having these conversations with amazing women doing amazing things, what they all have in common is a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Whether, it's God, Jesus, or
Yep.
meditation, whatever
Hmm.
it is, they have a practice that allows them to get still. They have a practice that allows them to get quiet. And it sounds like, you're very intentional now with what you're choosing to focus on. And in
Yes.
the past, there was distraction. One, I want you to share a little bit about like, what does your spiritual practice look like, and how does that like keep you going? And then secondly, what does your intentionality look like with like your focus? Like, how are you making your decisions on what you choose to focus on and what you don't choose to focus on now?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think for me, it's a series of things. You know, it's getting to a community of people that can pour into you. I think that's important. I know for me in the past, I've done a lot of pouring into people, and it has not been an even exchange. And I burnt myself out last year. So as I went through that process of knowing who to pour into and who not to pour into. I think that's something that for me, because I am a person of service, you know, I like to pour into people. I love to support people and everything. And I think now where I am, each stage, I feel like it changes. You know, your spiritual life, the more I elevate, the more I have to rely on God, the more I have to listen to more sermons, the more I have to be around people that are talking about Christ. You know, I'm not a oh, I got to read my Bible every single day. You know, that's not my reality. I'm not going to sit here and be like, yeah, read the Bible every day, because sometimes I read the Bible and it doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to be really honest with you. So for me, it's finding creative ways to connect with God. Sometimes I go into a fast. I know for me, I've been looking at Pastor Mike Todd. He's coming up with 21 days of fasting. I'm going to be intentional to be a part of that fast also too as well. So for me, it's the more I elevate is looking for things that I know realistically that can fit into who I am and who I am. Because God knows us ultimately. He knows what we will commit to and what we will not commit to. So for me is I'm committed this year of saying 21 days of killing a bad habit. Maybe it's staying off drinking for some time. Maybe it's cutting back on social media, whatever that looks like for you. I feel like with everybody, it's going to be different, but you have to do that full assessment of yourself and say, this is where I am currently. These are the things that I'm struggling with. And God is a gracious God. He's not going to reprimand us for anything. His arms are always wide open. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I know, like, even when I don't read my devotionals on a day-to-day basis, I feel disconnected. You know, I feel like I don't feel right. So there's some things that you can start to do where there's a Bible app, you can get on there, read devotionals. I used to be a devotional girl. I'm trying to get back into those practices, and I'm sharing this thing from a place of transparency. I feel like a lot of people are giving people cookie cutter things, and sometimes the consistency part is not what we're talking about. So that's why I'm talking about what works for Nimi. So for me, what works for me is having a few minutes in the moment, just laying in my bed and talking to God,
Yeah.
whether it's just saying thank you for waking me up, or God, I know today's going to be a hard day, and I need help. I'm working on XYZ. I'm getting ready to roll out this campaign. What do you think about the strategy? And then sometimes God may not answer me for like weeks or months, and I could be asleep, And then he starts speaking to me. And I'm like, oh snap, he's giving me, he's downloading me with something that I gotta put on my phone and put, create a voice note or whatever. So for me, because I consider myself as a creative, God talks to me in colors sometimes, in colors. I may see it in colors, I may see it in components. I'm a tech girl, he'll be like, hey, slice it and dice it like this or whatever. So that's just to show you our relationship with God. Each and every single one of us human beings is going to look very different. So I'm only sharing with you what I know has truly worked for me, and how I continue to foster that relationship with Christ on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I'm hearing in your message too, like there is routine and consistency. But when
Yeah.
you're not in routine or you fall short and you're not consistent, there's a little misalignment that's happening.
Yep.
I think this is important for women who are listening, for anyone who's listening, when you're talking about activating your inner warrior, there is there is a certain level of consistency. Hi, how are you? This is a warrior woman, mom, wife, right? Owner. But yeah, there's a, when you're talking about activating that inner warrior, there is a level of routine and consistency that has to be in place, and the spiritual practice. Like these are they're just the principles that come with it. And I'm happy that you're sharing it and being transparent about it too. And hey, sometimes we get off. Sometimes we're off because we're not perfect. Like we will fall off, but are we being intentional about making sure that we're back in alignment? I want to shift a little bit, and I want to hear more about Agile Bay. Like I am so inspired. I'm totally in love with the brand. I follow it dearly. Total fan. But for those who do not know about Agile Bay, let's talk about the beginning. Let's talk about the
Yeah.
beginning of Agile Bay, and then we'll shift to where you are now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. The beginning of Agile Bay. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in Brazil, and I remember sitting in my hotel balcony in 2021, and I was going through a really, really hard time in my career. And I remember going on this trip as an escape. I went on this trip. I ended up going. I was supposed to go with my husband, and then in a weird way, it kind of worked out that it became a solo trip. And I'm really grateful looking back at the experience because it gave me an opportunity to kind of sit down and to reflect on the things that I wanted and just being intentional. And I remember sitting on that balcony and just talking about, man, I got to separate myself from Lincoln Power because people thought I was Lincoln Power. And Lincoln Power was not about Nimi at all. Like, I wanted to create a separation. I remember people would DM me on Lincoln Power asking me about agile stuff or whatever. And I was like, okay, something's going on here. Good problem, but now I got to separate myself. And for the people that follow me on Instagram, my name used to be Venus on Instagram before. And I sat down. I was like, I'm going through this career transformation or whatever was going on. I was literally cheated out of a promotion, in short. So that happened, and I think it kind of was like a blow to my ego, if I'm being completely honest. A blow to my ego. So I'm sitting here and I'm just like praying to God, and I'm just thinking through like, wow, how am I going to create the separation? And literally, it came to me again. I'm sitting there in Brazil with my Lincoln Power notebook. I'll never forget, and I'm writing all these things down that I wanted for myself. And I was like, I want to be able to build. I need to build something. I'm good with adapting. I'm trying to enhance capabilities. How can I come up with a cute way to still educate people on all things agile and still have my voice and me separated as the founder from Lincoln Power, right? And that's literally how Agile Bay came about. And I remember writing the name down, and I was like, oh, Agile Bay. So I start Googling Agile Bay, and I saw nothing. I saw nothing.
Wow.
Started Googling it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I started going on social media, looking at the names. I was like, nobody has Agile Bay? I'm going to be Agile Bay then. That's the case. So I messaged one of my friends and I was like, hey, this is the name or whatever. And she was like, oh my God, this is going to even be bigger than Lincoln Power. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I wasn't even thinking anything outside of just trying to just separate myself literally for social media purposes and just for business purposes, start just creating that separation and just having a true personal brand versus a business brand. Because there is a thing called personal versus a business brand. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. So so I remember looking at the names and I went ahead and I came back from Brazil and I literally was like, you know what? Is agilebay.com available? Bought the domain, did the whole rebrand thing, came up with colors, all this stuff. And I did not know that I was setting myself up for a global expansion. I did not know any of this was going to happen because literally I'm just thinking separation of myself and my business, literally, and the rest is history. I've done consulting work under Agile Bay. And people now literally call me Agile Bay. People know that my name is Nimi Bello, but they just enjoy calling me Agile Bay. And it kind of just started to really draw people's attention, and people just love the name. People just love the fact that I was educating and empowering people in all things agile, being a scrum master, and it kind of just started to market itself, and I kind of just started to embrace it more and more. And the more Agile Bay continued to grow, and not only the tech space, I started to see like, wow, I could be doing so much more out of this. And I've literally gotten people like pitching different things to me, all because they think that the name is dope. And that's to show you that God deposits things in us. And sometimes he's waiting for us to say yes to things for us to go to the next level. But
Yeah.
in order for you to get to that level, you have to go through the obedience aspect of just saying yes, because the end goal is not going to look different. It's not going to look the same like the beginning of where he's taking you from. So I think for me, it's just a realization of how powerful our God is. And I think we're so small sometimes. We think so small on a small scale, and God is trying to literally elevate and take us from the small space to greater heights. So that's kind of how Agile Base started. And now we are in fashion, which is still crazy to even think about.
Yeah. So it's the evolution, right? One, I commend you because it is not easy to say yes to the unknown. Okay. I don't know who is comfortable without knowing the outcome, right? So there is a discomfort when you're trying something new and it could potentially fail. Or
Yeah.
like, actually, I'm trying something new and I don't really know what I'm doing, right? So I commend you for that. And I think that's a part of like tapping into that inner warrior is, you know what, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say yes to this thing because it feels right. It's actually it's not in the mind, it's really in the spirit, right? Like it's like
Yes.
this feels right and I'm going to follow it. So I commend you for saying yes to that. Tell me about the evolution though to the fashion brand. So now Agile Bay is a clothing line, has its own,
Yeah.
clothing brand. Tell me more.
So we did the thing with, Clubhouse, and I remember going on the Clubhouse and educating people on all things agile. And I remember growing the Clubhouse community, which is insane. We're about what, close to 2,000 plus people across the globe on Clubhouse, with just the intent of I want to educate my people on an industry that I've been really passionate about for the last 7, 8 years. And giving people an opportunity to make a career change and to pivot, or even businesses a chance to know like you can use this thing to scale your business. Like you literally can 10x your business by going following agile principles and values, right? So I was doing that for a while. And I think for me, organically, my Instagram account has kind of, since I've rebranded, I've actually grown a lot more exponentially as opposed to being when I was being in. So people see the names and think it's a clubhouse and just what I was, and people just loving it. Like people literally will follow me, like, oh my God, you're Agile Bay. And I'm like, yes, it's me. They're like, I love your page. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. And what started to happen was people would organically ask me, they've always asked me, like, oh wow, you're wearing this. I love where'd you get this from? I'm seeing you with this dress on. Where's it from? And I remember Nancy had reached out to me about the Leadership Expo and going to Nigeria in October. And I've always told, I remember having a conversation with my dad about the need for investing in Nigeria, the need for doing something back home. And I think for me, I had a different perception, a different idea of what that was going to look like. I was thinking more of like brand partnerships and just something very, very on a small scale. So I get to Nigeria. This is October 2021. And I meet this amazing individual. She's so talented. And we just she starts making clothes for me. I'm her customer at this point. So we start having a conversation, and an opportunity came about for us to partner together and collaborate. So I start asking her about, what are her goals? Where does she see herself and all this stuff? And at that point, Agile Bay was already at a point where people knew me for my consulting work, that I knew that easily if I wanted to expand into something else, I don't want to say it was going to be easy. It was going to be something that people would embrace and also give it a different look and feel of what Agile Bay is all about, which is building, adapting, and enhancing, right? So because I positioned it in such a way where those three pillars are transcend to like different people in different spaces, there's so much more that I start to see for Agile Bay outside of just consulting and just talking about tech or whatever. And even though I'm still passionate about those things, I feel like now here's an opportunity for me to really showcase my fashion thing that I've always wanted to do. Because fashion for me has always been something that, when it comes to putting my looks together, it's not hard for me to do those things. But I started to notice that for a lot of people, it is difficult putting looks together, making things look aesthetically pleasing and stuff. It's stuff like that. So for me, I can do that in my sleep. I'm not saying this to like be boastful, but I really enjoy getting dressed up, looking good, and all that stuff. Because as a woman in tech, I never got an opportunity to actually showcase that side of me until I started getting more comfortable. Because again, I'm working with white male counterparts, so I think this is kind of like my escape from my reality in a weird way. So, because I'm behind the computer all day. So for me, it's, sourcing for fabric, going through patterns, going through designs and everything was now a whole different world that I was like, wow, I've been creating graphics. I've been doing all this amazing things. I'm like literally a creator at this point. I'm creating things or whatever. I can do this. I can. And I remember putting in my first order, I'll never forget, for the things that I wanted to sell. I had no website at that time. No website was available, just Instagram. And I posted this reel just kind of showcasing the different looks that I had. And the clothes sold out in 2 weeks.
Wow.
I don't want to say without much effort, but I remember when the clothes came and it was just sitting in my office for like 2 weeks because I was trying to come up with a marketing campaign and God was like, just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Just be you. Don't put too much thought into it. Just put it out there. And I remember like literally in this office, putting my camera in the corner, putting on the clothes, putting on the reel, creating the reel and just putting it together. And literally people were like, wait, you have clothing? Like you're selling clothes? Like basically people were like actually waiting for me to kind of come into the space. And it got so many positive reviews and people were DMing me like, wow, this is amazing. Oh my God, I can't wait to support your brand. Where's the website? All this stuff. So I'm sharing this to say that sometimes we kind of get into our own way.
Mm-hmm.
We get into our own way. We look at other people and we say, oh, somebody's already doing that. There's already so many clothing stuff out there. There's so much this, there's so much that. But guess what? There's so many people in this world for you to market to. There's so many people. There's so many people in this world. So for me, I just started to just really embrace what the things that God had been putting in place for me and stop limiting myself. I got out of limiting belief mindset.
That's powerful.
And I think also for me, it was, I was in a space of trying to figure out what I wanted to do with Lincoln Power. And I kind of got stuck. And I feel like God was showing me, this is where I want you to go. Let Lincoln Power rest and let's focus on this for now. And I'm not going to lie, it was a very, very hard process for me to go through because I felt like I failed.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I kind of felt like, damn, like what are people going to say? And like, I kind of felt like I was disappointing other people that relied on the platform itself. And I remember just kept on trying to go through the motions of trying to put Lincoln Power together. Nancy knows that we used to have conversations about this all the time. And it was just like, it was so obvious that it was time for me to pivot. And that was one of the hardest, most challenging, mentally exhausting things that I've ever gone through. If I think about it, outside of childbirth. So,
Right.
right. So literally, it was like a tug of war. I felt the pull, like God was like pulling me, and I'm like, no, no, no. To the point that I remember still going forward and promoting the conference for Lincoln Power. I sold no tickets.
Hmm.
I sold no tickets, and I was still promoting it. I was still promoting it. And I went from, okay, you know what? The conference is not happening. I'm going to make it free. We're going to have it on YouTube. And in the back of my mind, I don't want to say I knew this was it. I knew that the focus needed to be shifted.
Yeah.
I knew. I knew. So I'm sharing all this to say that sometimes pivoting is not as bad as we think it is. It's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
And we have to get into a space where we're really comfortable with listening to the voice of God and getting out of our own plans. Because we can plan all day. We can plan all day. But let's always remember who has the ultimate say in the things that we're doing. It's not us, it's God. And I think sometimes we get into the habit of we get into so deep into the plan that we forget who is ultimately driving the roadmap for your
Mhm.
success. It's
Yeah,
not you.
I'm saying I think it's really key to be in alignment, right? So when you're in alignment, you just know what you're supposed to do,
Yeah.
and you can surrender to the knowing, right? So it's an inner feeling. Again, like I really want women or whoever's listening to this podcast, from her story and the stories that we've shared before, these women have this inner knowing of what is supposed to happen, and then they
Yes.
say yes to that. So it's just surrendering to like your mind or the imposter syndrome or the whatever. Like, let's not even pay attention to that
Yes.
feeling on the inside. I surrender to you. And even though I don't know where it's going to take me, I'm going to follow that yes and
Yes.
see where it ends up taking me. And you've had in 2 years, right? Because you said you went to Brazil in February of 2021.
Yep.
We're approaching February of 2023. In
Yes.
2 years, you went from a name and Googling Agile Bay to literally having a fashion brand that's been featured in Atlanta Fashion Week and upcoming New York Fashion Week. And I think that's the power of saying yes to the call. And not only
Yeah.
that, also that dream that you had of being able to empower people in Africa. Every single piece that's made is made from the hands of an African, so you get to empower them at the same
Yes.
time empowering women through your fashion brand. I think it's beautiful. I think it's amazing. I think it's powerful. And I commend you for really choosing to say yes to the call.
Yeah. It's so crazy because it's like every time I think about Agile Bay and I go to sleep, I'm like, wow, like God, I'm able to provide jobs for people back home. Like
Yeah.
this makes me really, really happy to the point that we've had to expand. I've had to get more tailors involved because I went from a one woman team, who was helping to do everything end to end, and now I've kind of shifted her out to kind of just being more overseeing the process since I'm not there physically. And whoever's listening to this podcast, I want to encourage people to start investing more in Africa. Invest more in Africa. They need us back home, and I think for me, with the amount of experience and the exposure that I've gotten from my corporate journey, I'm in a space where it's like those are the things that feeds me, that makes me happy. Like when I'm going through the creative process with Agile Bay and just like coming up with like the marketing and stuff, I get really excited because I'm able to showcase the beauty of Africa, the beauty of my culture, my roots. And I think there's something that just makes me feel like the most powerful woman. Like when I wear my pieces, I feel so confident. And I also when I see the feedback from other women, like I got a text just last night that almost literally messed me up. Like I was like about to cry. Like a lady messaged me and was like, wow, I tried on my dress and I've never felt more beautiful.
Wow.
There's nothing more inspiring than when you create something and people are genuinely as excited. And even coming off the high of the Agile Bay experience in December and celebrating my Jesus year, and just seeing how beautiful people looked at my pieces and just positive vibes, just celebrating not just me, but also the brand, it literally brought nothing but joy to me, because it's not easy for you to create something and for people to embrace it like it's their own. It's definitely a humbling experience that I can never forget or get tired of
Right.
talking about.
And again, I want to thank you, because you saying yes to that vision has allowed you to empower not only Black people on the continent of Africa, but
Yeah.
also here in the US, your team, the people that you are intentionally using to do your marketing, your photography, your event planning. Like, you are so intentional about who you bring on and who you give opportunity to. And
Yes.
Agile Bay is doing that for Black
Yeah.
people, Black women and men all across the world. So thank you. Thank you for your vision. Thank you
Yes.
for saying yes to it. Before we wrap up, I want to give you an opportunity to just give final words to anyone, any woman that's listening to this podcast. What are your words for her so she can move forward with her warrior woman?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that whatever you are thinking and dreaming and it's constantly on your heart, move forward with it. Move forward with it. Don't think you have time, and just don't, because time waits for nobody. Like the pandemic was a huge awakening for all of us that there's no time for us to waste. So I just want to encourage you to be intentional about what your calling is. Get in alignment with God, get in the right community of people, share your ideas with the right people, because there's a such thing as sharing your ideas with the wrong people, because people will discourage you. I've been discouraged a lot, because I dream big. A lot of times people question my capabilities and stuff like that, but I know that all the things that I've gone through, there's nothing that Nimi Bello cannot do, and you can do it too. You can. So I want to encourage any woman that is listening to this, mom, wife, sister, friend, whoever you are, and I just want you to get up and do it. Get up and do it. Surround yourself with the right resources, and I just want to use this opportunity to also even say, like, I was just reminded yesterday that Agile Bay experience was successful with all Black creatives. I did not even think about that, like from the venue space. It was not Asian owned, it's Black woman owned at that. From the venue space to photography to all of my vendors, every single one was a Black creative. Do you know how powerful that is?
Beautiful. That's so beautiful.
I didn't even think about that, because again, I was being intentional. So when you're being intentional about things, sometimes you don't think about the small details. So for me, I was just kind of looking at the recap video yesterday and I got really emotional, like, wow, like this quality and this excellence was created by Black people collaborating. So I just want to encourage all the Black creatives out there that are listening to this. And if you're in the creative space, let's not give up on each other.
Yeah.
Let's not give up on each other. I know sometimes, we get upset, we have misalignments and we have missed opportunities just because there was not a clear understanding or what the values are, value propositions and all that stuff. So I just want to encourage us to continue to provide opportunities for each other.
Wonderful.
Overall.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for using your voice to empower, inspire, to spark, and to just make transformation both here in the US and across Africa. So thank you, Nimi, for just being you. And
Thank
congratulations,
you.
Agile Bay.
Thank you. I appreciate you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Have a wonderful day.